Why is there so many people have a vested interest, really passionate to talk about property, but have no clue what they're actually talking about, or don't have any data to back their opinions? Why is that the case? And I realized it was a combination of people are misinformed, uninformed, and ill-informed because A, they're speaking to the wrong people, or B, the media is playing a role in terms of their view, and also C, their own biases as well too. So I think it was a combination of those things. This was my experience that was occurring. And because of the mistakes I made earlier on as an investor, I realized how important it is to provide good quality, independent education and advice.
Welcome to Get Invested on the Property Hub podcast channel, the leading weekly show for Australians who want to learn how to unlock their full self, health and wealth potential. I'm your host, Bushy Martin, and each week I go deep with the best investors, experts, leaders and founders to find out what it takes to break free from the grind, discover freedom and to live by design. Subscribe now and join me and get invested in the life that you really want. Let's get started.
Hi, freedom fighters. When it comes to property, what have you actually done? Not thought about or talked about or read about, but actually done. And if you have done something in property, did you do it on a bit of a whim and a prayer after a chat with a friend? Or did you prepare first by developing a strategy and an approach based on a very clear vision and guidance and support from others who've successfully invested in property? Because it's when you actually do something, and it's how you do it, that the rubber really hits the road. And all of your head knowledge is actually put to the test when the added pressure of stress is applied in the heat of battle. Yes, you can learn the theory and have very finely educated opinions, but how you act and respond to the friction of action is what separates the sheep from the goats when it comes to sustainable success in property and just about every other endeavour. It's when you really find out whether what you've been hearing and reading about is actually true and stands up to the test. And it's where you get to learn about yourself and how you behave and how you respond to big decisions. And action is where the true learning of how things happen and actually work really comes into play. So until you do it, and you do it right, you'll never actually know. Because property investment isn't a noun, but a verb. It's a doing word, not a thinking theory. Yes, you need to put a lot of thinking and strategy into the preparation. And yes, you need a proven team of independent professionals who walk their own talk in your property team to make it happen properly. But at the end of the day, it's about what you do, not what you think and say that really counts. But whose counsel, advice and direction do you take before you actually take that action? Someone who talks a great believable story, bearing in believable data and delivered with confidence to coerce you to engage them? Or someone who has actually done what you're intending to do without any vested interest? In this respect, Robert Kiyosaki, your Rich Dad Poor Dad fame, always says that talk is cheap, but action speaks louder than words, as he reinforces that you need to watch what a person does more than what they say, because actions are the truest reflection of a person's character and intentions. Now, while words can be persuasive, actions carry the weight of authenticity and sincerity. Yes, words are a vital tool for communication, but actions are where intentions actually manifest. So for me, it's always been those that walk their talk, as opposed to those that talk big and confidently, but often separate and operate on the basis of do as I say, not necessarily do as I do. In comparison, as an active investor talks about what they've done, it's not what you should do, and it tells you how it is all in a lump sum all fashion, along with how they felt and what they experienced at the time, as opposed to a self-professed guru who's trying to convince you to invest in property because it benefits them, often more than you, which is sadly increasingly becoming the case. It's why Get Invested continues to talk to actual hands-on property investors who've been in the trenches and can unpack the nitty-gritties of their real-life learnings on how they invest, what they invest in and why, what have been the challenges, what's worked and what hasn't, what they feel and how they react at the time, and what has changed for them over the journey. And today's guest is a great example of all of this in our continuing Active Investor series, not only because he's been there and done it and continues to do it in relation to property investment, but he's a great communicator and takes the time to share his experience with others for no other reason than to help you learn faster so that you can avoid many of the pitfalls that a lot of us have made. And importantly, he has no vested interest or barrow to push in sharing his investor experience. He's a full-time employee who invests in his spare time, unlike many investors who become buyer's agents or other allied property professionals and then spend their time convincing you to engage and invest with them as much for their business benefit as it is to yours. So it's with great pleasure that I introduce you to Azim Rahman, or as he likes to be known. Now, I first stumbled across Az when I read one of his LinkedIn blogs a few months ago, which I actually found very insightful and engaging. And this has led me to read all of his Real Estate Muscles property investment blogs, which we're going to talk about in the second episode of our great conversation, and I encourage you to do the same. Well, as you're about to hear, Az's journey from humble beginnings to a seasoned investor is a testament to the power of his absolute determination and grit. When he was just 24, he embarked on his real estate journey with no roadmap, no mentorship, and no formal education. Yet, through sheer perseverance and hard work and an unwavering belief in his vision, he's had the insight to surround himself with the right people at the right time and taken the action required to grow a $3 million plus property portfolio as we speak. And after accelerating his own portfolio, he's now committed to sharing his hard-earned wisdom with you and others on the strength of his coaching background and his first-hand understanding and appreciation of the importance of having a coach and seeking quality advice for those who walk the path that you're looking to take. As he's going to share, Az draws on his hands-on experience and expertise in property investing has been forged using his very methodical and scientific outlook, as he doesn't believe in leaving success to chance, and he encourages you and all property investors to adopt a strategic and calculated approach. So I'm really looking forward to deep diving on his experience this week, along with all things property investing next week. So welcome, and let's get invested, Az.
Bushy, let's get invested indeed. Thank you so much for that, that introduction. I'm really humbled and I'm really glad to be on the show.
Well, I'm looking forward to it. We enjoyed a great chat on Realty Talk recently and some other great information to share. But for those that haven't heard about you or haven't had a chance to see those Realty Talk episodes yet, can you sort of kick things off for us by telling us what you do differently and, as importantly, why you do what you do as?
Yeah, absolutely. So in terms of, what I do, I think you mentioned a little bit there in your introduction, Bushy, and I'm an all-time employee and, in my spare time, I've been consciously and actively working in the property space to build a property portfolio for myself and for my wife. And I also had an opportunity and was blessed with the ability to work in the industry for a short period of time as well too, which was fantastic. And so it was a combination of that short experience I had working in the industry, but also the exposure and the experience and the education I built personally as an investor as well too. That really helped me to realize as time went by that, geez, the majority of people don't actually have a clue what they're talking about when they're so confidently giving you advice, whether that be family, whether that be relatives and friends. The reality is I find that 99% of them have zero clue and expertise. And even the very few that do, most people don't even take their advice on board. So what I realized was I took the time to think about, well, why is that the case? Why is there so many people have a vested interest, really passionate to talk about property, but have no clue what they're actually talking about or don't have any, data to back their opinions? Why is that the case? And I realized it was a combination of people are misinformed, uninformed, and ill-informed because A, they're speaking to the wrong people, or B, the media is playing a role in terms of their view, and also C, their own biases as well too. So I think it was a combination of those things, as was my experience that was occurring. And because of the mistakes I made earlier on as an investor, I realized how important it is to provide good quality, independent education and advice. And that's where the why came into the picture, why I started to do this, because I definitely wanted to, I knew that over the last 8 years, I have a lot of experience that's come under my belt, both working in the industry, and also personally. But I need to share this because I know a lot of people who work unethically in the industry, people who are out there just to earn an extra buck, who just want to drive more business, but also on the flip side, just the everyday, the everyday Australian as well too, who just doesn't know how to get started and how to navigate this complex beast. How do they get the assistance that they need? So for me, it started off with articles on LinkedIn, and hopefully in the future to sort of expand that content into, in more formats. But the essence is to be able to just provide freely and authentically my skills, experience, and knowledge so that people can be able to benefit from it. And even if just Bushy, one person reads an article of mine and takes a benefit from it, then for me, that's exactly what I was hoping to achieve.
Yeah, I love what you're doing. As I sort of mentioned in the intro, I sort of stumbled across them because I'm one of these lifelong learners and always looking to, and I've got real interest in the area, obviously. But I can honestly say that there's not a day that I've spent that I'm still not learning something that I didn't know in the game. And when I came across your articles, I just think you've got that happy knack of getting to the essence of what the true information is that you need to be sharing. It's not covered in fluff and self-justification, and it's fairly easy to digest. And I don't know about you, but I know that when I sat down to actually write material, you actually get you get a lot clearer on what you actually believe and how to communicate that as a result of it. So it's a good process for those that are reading it, but it's probably been a useful process to you. Has that been the case?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's, because there's so many thoughts and ideas and insights and reflection you have, it really helps you to crystallize by putting it down, but also to structure it as well too. And like you said, it gives you the benefit of both. It gives you the benefit to say, okay, what is it that I'm trying to convey also, but how does it need to come across to the everyday person so that it registers as well too in simple language? And I'm a sucker for analogies as well too, particularly with, fitness and health and going to the gym. So I'm able to sort of use a lot of the analogies to help people to understand what is the key message here, in a particular topic.
Yeah, I think the gym analogies that you use are very good ones, and hence the real estate muscles, I guess, the title, because there's a lot of similarity in what you need to get fit and stay fit alongside the property side of the equation, which we'll talk about later in some degree. But what I'd love to do now is really circle back as far as you'd like to go and walk us through first your personal journey, because I'm sort of interested to find out how your early background and upbringing has influenced who you are and who you've become. And with a particular focus, I guess, during that chat around, when you dipped your toe into the industry, what did that look like? What did you learn from that? And how's that sort of shaped where you are and where you're at?
So, I've been born and brought up here in Sydney. And for those who are listening, it's, I've been living around the western suburbs in Sydney. And, my background is Pakistani. So my parents have been in Australia for more than 30 years now. And as you could appreciate, I'm sure, you've had conversations with others. Typically when your parents are coming here as migrants, they have a mentality which is to put your head down, work hard, save, pay off the mortgage, and then also to make sure that, we're thinking about the additional savings that we need for future upcoming expenses. And that's as far as it goes. Yep. So even the word investment is not something that I grew up in my household. It's not a word that was thrown around or even sort of synonymous words in our household. And whilst my parents never really went to the degree to sit me down and talk to me about finances and talk to me about how they were managing things, as you naturally do as a kid, you just pick things up along the way. You pick up the habits, you get an idea of what your parents are like, where their focus is and what it is. And in my case, it certainly was a big focus on saving. Saving was a big thing in addition to paying off the mortgage. So I think fast forward all the way through to my young years as a teenager, working right from the age of 14 and 9 months, the legal age, up until now as a married man, savings has just been inherent. And I don't think that would be any different to anyone, particularly if you've grown up in a household where savings is important. So I think that's pretty common for households where that upbringing has been there. But within my family and within my sort of upbringing, because investing was not something that was really discussed, I knew from social networks, conversations with friends, extended family and relatives, the power of real estate. And I knew that there was obviously people were making money through this that would be able to actually invest their hard-earned money, and it was returning a good positive return for them, both either in terms of cash flow or actually return. So I knew from a young age that, okay, this definitely is an asset that can provide a good, strong return. I just didn't know how that was going to happen for me. But I did know at a young age, I am actually going to move ahead and move into this space.
So were you thinking around the sort of age 15-ish? When did this sort of, because it's interesting, because often people don't make that leap. They get well grounded in the need to save, but it's a big leap from saving to investing. I'd love to understand where that interest came from. I can understand, everyone talks about property, but making that leap from I'm not just going to save, but I'm actually going to invest to grow wealth. Is that something that just you had intrinsically, or did you pick that up from somewhere, if you can remember?
I'd say it was more intrinsic, and it definitely was right from when I had first started to work. I knew that that's where I eventually want to get to. And I don't know how long it was going to take at that time. As you do as a teenager, you don't have a good, strong foresight to say, okay, I'm going to be able to have this much of a deposit ready to invest. But I knew at some point I was going to purchase an investment property and start from there. I knew that was going to happen at some point. I just didn't know exactly when. Yeah. But fast forward, it ended up happening at the age of 24 for me when I purchased my first property, which was purely as a result of just, hard work and excelling in my career in the early years so that I could actually grow my salary at an exponential rate, which then in turn allowed me to rely on the savings mindset that I had to put that savings aside for that initial deposit. So it was kind of like a jigsaw puzzle with a lot of things moving parts here. There was a lot of hard work that I was putting in to increase my salary to then put away, but also then in addition to that salary, I was able to then rely on the sort of the habit that I've learned from my parents to then save that disposable income towards the deposit. So it was a good little marry up of the two there for me, which then allowed me to go ahead and purchase that first investment property, which by all means was I was not a good investment. And I think it was.
Let's park that one, because we're actually going to get you to take us through the nitty gritties of your investment journey shortly. Sort of before we get there though, you sort of mentioned earlier that you dipped your toe in the water in relation to the industry. So from the personal and professional perspective, thread the needle for us a little bit in terms of what you did and when and how that got you to the point where you were then able to start investing. Can you sort of share that with us?
Yeah, sure. So when I was working full-time after I finished university, it was in the financial services industry, so predominantly in the insurance sector. Yeah. And it was after working there for a good four years is when I then had enough money available to put towards a deposit for the first investment property. So as time went by, I realized that at that age that it was important to diversify my skills and my experience. So even though I was within the same industry, I moved around and performed a variety of different roles as the years went by. So I had a good amount of experience and ability to move into different areas of the business that I had no previous exposure to, because the skills that I had developed were transferable.
Yeah.
I remember that I was having a chat with a previous colleague of mine who was also my mentor, who had decided to take a leap and actually move into the real estate industry themselves, and they were helping and organizing, some work to be done in a particular company. And I remember I was at the gym and they gave me a call and said, look, hey, there might be an opportunity if you're interested to come and work in real estate. And I said, oh, look, I don't know if I've got any, skills or experience either that I could come and add value. But, lo and behold, after having multiple conversations with my mentor, I then came to realize that actually it wasn't the experience that they were after, because I didn't have any. It was the actual skills that they needed me to bring to the table to help the business. Yeah. And so because young, just married but no kids, it was a good opportunity to take a risk and try something different. Otherwise, I'm the type of person, if I don't give it a crack and if I don't say, yep, I'll do it, then it will just itch me for the rest of my life and I'll regret it and say, oh, geez, I wish I would have done that. What if this happened, or what if that happened? I wonder where that would have led me. So, I had my wife's head of support. So we just decided to go ahead and took the plunge. And that was back in 2022. So a couple of years ago. I then had that opportunity to work in there. And once again, an eye opener. Within real estate, yes, it's a high level term that we use, but the amount of separate sectors within the industry and the different sectors that make up the industry, it's enormous. It's gigantic. And I realized, I was like, wow, yes, I am gaining some experience now professionally in the industry, but I was a small little fish in a small little lake compared to the big, wide industry. And you don't realize that until you kind of get into it.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I love that. I'm assuming then that the time you spent there wasn't long. Why? The two things I want to hone in on. You mentioned mentor a minute ago, and again, not many people have a mentor, so I'd be interested in you unpacking who was the type of person and why did you even have a mentor? But secondly, in relation to that experience in the industry, why did you then bail out and then go back into what you're doing now?
So in terms of why I decided to bail out and go into what I was doing is, as I said to you, for me, I think I'm just naturally always somebody who has a high importance on the values and how you portray that in every relationship, personal relationships, your friendships, intimate, social, and most definitely in a work context and professional as well too. And whilst it was a great learning for me as well too, I realized very quickly during that time how quickly and easy it is to fool both clients and investors into purchasing particular types of properties. And it was easy. I realized it because I was also in that boat when I first started. You have no understanding of how the real estate market works. You have no understanding of finance. You've got no understanding about the data, let alone the metrics as well too. And it's quite easy then for a regular mum and dad, family, or for a first-time investor to sit in front of a presentation, being shown some fantastic graphs and some fantastic slides, but underneath of it, it actually has no substance. And the analogy I would use is you look at a really shiny, polished apple and it looks amazing, and you're sold and you buy it and you take that first bite and it's absolutely rotten from the inside. So that's exactly what I was experiencing at that time. And I realized very quickly, it was like, well, number one, I don't believe in this. So if I don't believe in it, there's no way that I can help others in this regard. And it's just not going to work. So that was at the real crux of why I decided to leave and move back into where my previous experience is, until I've been able to figure out where it is that I would see myself longer term in the industry in a both ethical way, but also in a way that you genuinely are adding value and making a difference for clients. Yeah. And to your earlier question about the mentors, I think it again was also a little bit inherent in me, just because as a kid growing up, loved playing cricket, a huge cricket fan, as most Indians and Pakistanis are. Yeah. And as you do, when you're playing for the local cricket club and also for school cricket, you have a coach. So that sort of coach mindset was sort of subconsciously in my mind without even realizing it. In a work context, professionally speaking as well too, I just happened to be blessed when I moved working full-time to be surrounded by some really good leaders who just took me under their wing. I didn't know what it really meant to be a mentor. I didn't understand there's a difference between a coach and a mentor, and what that relationship looks like. But I still remember the first mentor that I had about 10 years ago when I was working in the call center. He just took me under his wing and really gave me all the support that I needed to actually flourish. And fast forward 10 years later, he's by far one of the greatest leaders that I've ever worked with. And in fact, he's a very close family friend now as well too. So what I found, and I think this applies to all aspects, including real estate and getting advice and mentoring as well too. A good mentor and a good teacher is someone who tells you where to look, but doesn't tell you what to see. Yeah. I think that's what I found a really good teacher and mentor does, because they're essentially helping you to figure things out yourself as well too, because you don't want them coming back to you all the time and asking for assistance. So that's what's always stuck to me, and that's what this mentor has done for me. And hopefully I'd like to think that over the years I've been able to do that for others and do it more down the track as well.
I love that. I think the interesting thing about the mentor-student relationship, if you like, in that sense, it's a two-way street though. You say you've been fortunate to rub shoulders with those people, but it's, that old saying that when the student's ready, the teacher arrives. I think, from the little bit that of time I've spent with you, you're a very ready and curious person who's open to learning, and that encourages people who can see that in you and see that you're genuinely wanting to learn for the right reasons, for them to take the action to then assist you on that pathway. So it's very much a two-way street, I think, in that those terms and I mention that because for those that are listening to our conversation today, it's not all about the mentor. To have a good mentor-student relationship, so to speak, you've got to demonstrate that you are open and you're taking the action and doing the thinking that's required to actually take it on board and make meaningful changes in who you are and what you're doing. So I love that. You mentioned values before as well, and I'm very big on values. In fact, all my personal and professional decisions are based on values. If the value fit's not there, then I just keep moving. Tell us about, and you shared a little bit of this, but how your upbringing has affected your core values and beliefs, and how this has now influenced you in terms of your current and ongoing journey in life.
Well, growing up, the values that I saw, and I still see to this day with my parents, is the trust and honesty, and the importance of that. And just to share a little bit of what that actually means, to bring that to life in practical terms, my relationship with my dad was always one that was very strong, that even if I wasn't able to sort of share everything I wanted to with mum, I had that relationship with dad where I could say, hey, Dad, just want you to know this is what's really going on. This is where I'm going to be. This is what I'm doing. And so always had an honest, transparent relationship with my dad. And he really loved that as well too. And he was always proud of the fact that my son always comes and tells me. But that was purely because I saw that growing up as a kid between the relationship with mum and dad, and then also what they were trying to instill in me and my sister as well too. So I think that trust and honesty has always been there. And when you then move out of home and then you're out in the big wide world, when people are dishonest with you and you've grown up with that honesty, it's inside you. So when people aren't honest, you can feel it. You can smell it. You don't need to have a certification or a qualification to figure that out. It's just a human to connection where you can figure that out. Yes, on the flip side, if you haven't grown up in a household where those values are important, then you won't be able to actually be able to identify when someone's being honest or dishonest. So trust and honesty is definitely a couple that were there. And loyalty is huge as well too. To be completely honest, in the broader context of family and friends, there are a lot of relationships that haven't really stayed the long term. The marriages have fallen apart, the relationships didn't go well, or the relationships with the children wasn't great. But one thing I really do appreciate about my parents is that they have stuck it out together, thick and thin. And not because that was the right thing to do, was because they actually can make it work. I think there is the difference between when you have to call it quits and when you should moving forward. So I'm very conscious that there is a difference between the two. But parents have been, God bless them, been married for a very long time. And that was another thing that you learned along the way, which was the importance of loyalty and patience. And, fast forward again into the, like the present moment, the loyalty I have towards the people that are close to me is very strong. It's very select. It's very few. It's quality over quantity. Yeah. But they are the ones that I know that I will be with for the rest of my life, and they know who they are. But I think that's, again, was very important. My dad used to say to me when I was very young, he said, I never understood this, Bushy, by the way. He used to say to me when I was younger, he said, you don't understand this now, but when you get older, you'll realize in life, if you can have one or two really good friends, count yourself lucky. And I never really used to think, I'm like, one or two friends for the rest of your life? What? Come on, Dad, you're getting old. Like, you don't know what you're talking about. But fast forward to the present moment, Bushy, that could not be any more true. So yeah, my dad did know and still does know what he's talking about.
No, I love that. And it's interesting you mentioned that because my wife, Sonia, she's actually my best friend. and no question about it. And when you've got a couple of really good, genuine, true friends, you don't actually need too many others either. By the way, yes, I've got a lot of associations and working relationships with people, but when you've got true friends that you can be totally yourself, and where each party accepts each other for who they are, without trying to change them or judge them, then the sense of self-belief that comes out of that and the confidence that gives you to then tackle the world, I think you just can't put a price on it. Some great wisdom from your good father there. Something I always like to dig into is I'd love you to share what you consider to be the most challenging event that you've had in your life so far. So talk to us a bit about that, and talk to us about what you learned from that, and what changes, if anything, occurred as a result of that. Is there anything at all that comes to mind?
I think there are two things that I would say have been both a challenge, but also were a bit of a trigger as well to really get me to think differently and act differently. The first one was, as a young person growing up, I was 2 years old at the time when my dad had his first heart attack. And, my dad has had 3 heart attacks. He's, in fact, has had multiple heart attacks. He's had 3 bypasses.
Wow.
And only about 26% of his heart actually functions. And so he lives on a lot of medication. And if it isn't for that medication, he wouldn't be alive at this point in time. So, and there are a variety of reasons why that was the case, and that was the case in the dad's health. But what that made me realize was the importance of health. That was very, very, very important to me, was that if you do not have your health, it does not matter. Anything else will not matter. So I suppose that's why from a very young age, I knew the importance of health. And, I think when I was 15, my best mate at the time took me to a friend's garage, and we, I was the first time I touched weights ever. Yep. And fast forward to, the present moment of, training and remaining active is just ingrained in who I am, and I'll continue to do it till the day I drop dead. So I think that definitely was a big trigger for me, and a challenge as well too, because interestingly enough, coincides into the finances. So with dad's health being up and down, it naturally then played a role in terms of his ability to work, how long he could work for, the income that he was able to produce as a result of that, what impact that would have financially, emotionally, and mentally on mum and the household as a whole. So there was an intertwine there that I was seeing play out with health and wealth. And I knew that, okay, but regardless of that, I need to focus on my health anyways. But there is a connection there between the health and wealth and the finance. And so even to this day, I always tell Sarah, my wife, that, you need to look after your health. I need to look at my health, because we don't want to be a burden on each other. So that definitely was something I picked up. The second thing was, coincidentally, talking about my good wife, was when we got married. That was actually not a challenge, I would say, but it was more of a trigger for me. As a young bloke, when you're living with parents, you kind of tend to take things pretty easy, and you focus on your day-to-day things and what you need to do, but you're not really thinking about the household and how the household's actually running. But that all changes when you get married. So if anyone's not married, I guarantee you that definitely will change. And my summation of that, when I reflect on it, is when you're married and you're living separately, you have 100% freedom. But that 100% freedom is attached to 100% responsibility. Yeah, you can put things off, but you're going to have to do it eventually anyways. It's your responsibility. So, and that was what made me realize that if I need to get ahead with my wife, ahead for us financially, it's up to me. No one's going to come and save me, no matter how much my family loves me, no matter how good quality friends that I have, mentors, education that I go out there and I can seek, or it comes towards me. It is up to me and me alone to make this happen. And that, to be honest, probably accelerated a lot of my thought process and my planning into execution. Whereas in actual fact, if I was still living at home, I don't even know if the thinking would be there, let alone the execution towards, all the different things that need to be done, not just property investing, but holistic finance management 101. So those are the two that definitely come to mind.
Yeah, I love that. Some great lessons there in all aspects of life. And I mean, you're singing my tune. I've sort of come to the realization that the triumvirate of self, health, and wealth, you've really got to focus on all three, and they all affect each other. And the piece that joins and makes it happen in the middle is the health, because if you're focused on health, that means daily habitual activity a lot, which builds a discipline that you're then going to need if you're going to do anything in your health. And it's also the discipline you need in terms of your own personal development. So I think that health piece, thankfully, there's a lot more focus on it now than what there used to be. I don't know about your father, but in my dad's generation, it was all about wealth and all about work, and he basically worked himself in an early grave and ignored his health to his own detriment in the finish as a result of that. So I think there's a really important piece here that if you're chasing money for money's sake and what you think the pot of gold is at the end of the rainbow, but you're not treating it as a marathon and looking after yourself on a day-to-day basis in the process, one, you'll be in no fit state to enjoy it if you do get there, and two, you're probably less likely to make it happen because you just won't have the discipline and the habits and the rituals that you need to actually attain and then maintain that down the track. So I love that. What do you struggle with, Az?
What do I struggle with? Probably too many things if you were ask people who are close to me. But I would say two things I struggle with. One is more holistic about myself as an individual and how I go about things, and the other is specific to property. Yeah. Holistically, I'm a natural planner. So I am naturally someone who's a planner. In fact, when Sarah and I were dating, she didn't have my name saved as my name, but she had my name saved as Mr. Planner. So that should paint a little bit of a picture of how much of a planner I am. That if she had my name saved as Mr. Planner when we were dating, that says a lot. It's a blessing and a curse at the same time, and I'm aware of it. But I think the key there is self-awareness, like with anything. So I'm aware that planning is good, but only to a certain degree. So I've had to train myself over time to actually either not plan or plan to be unplanned, if that makes sense.
That totally makes sense.
So there's a fine balance that you need to have. And again, I think that's ingrained. Both of my parents are hardworking, and a lot of their lives have been structured around planning. So I think I just naturally have inherited that trait from them. So I have struggled with that. But what I find really helpful is I'm just fortunate that I'm married to someone who's a complete yin-yang with me. So she's the complete opposite to me, which is great. And that's what's needed for me as an individual. And it's also really, really, really helpful for our relationship and our marriage too. The second thing that I struggle with is when I first started investing, I didn't pay enough attention to the numbers. And now I spend too much time on it. Once you realize property is a numbers game, then all you look about and all you think about and all you analyze are the numbers, whether it's your strategy right from the start all the way through to a particular property that you're considering and doing a feasibility test, or if you're just tracking how your property portfolio is going at the moment. It's always about the numbers. And whilst it's great because that's where the insights come from and that's where you can then make informed decisions and take the next actions.
Yeah.
Also, again, too much of anything is not good. And what I've actually realized, again, my wife is quite different in that regard, whereas she really relies, she likes the data, but she's more gut feeling. Yeah. And so many times her gut feeling decisions have helped me to actually take a step back and look at it. And it's actually been the best decision that we've actually made. So that's definitely really important. And the second thing I find as well too for my own self and anyone who's listening who really is into the numbers, sometimes if you just take a bit of time out, however much time you need to strip away from the numbers, when you do come back at it, you will come back with a fresh pair of eyes and mind. And you may most likely pick up things you didn't pick up previously because you had spent so much time into it. So I think there is another additional benefit in there as well too. So 100% you do need to be looking at those numbers, analyzing it. But also, I also believe that, too much of anything is not good. And that can be the case in property. And, without going into too much detail at this point, but if it wasn't for my wife, one of the properties we would not have purchased if it wasn't for her. And that was a stellar property that performed incredibly well. So that's the difference it can make if you're too artsy about the numbers.
Oh, I love that. And the reason why I've got a massive smile on my face if you share that is that you just, your description of yourself and Sia is exactly the same as Sonia and I. I've relaxed a lot since the early days, but I had my whole life planned out down to the last minute almost. I had a spreadsheet for everything, and Sonia's a complete free spirit who just goes with how she feels and makes it up as she goes along, but has incredible intuition that's able to read a situation way beyond it. And I think I've reflected on this over the years, but I think to some degree, my own lack of self-belief means that I rely more on the numbers and I go into the detail because I don't trust my gut, or I've taught myself to ignore it. And you get so lost in the weeds at times that you lose sight of the art that is an essential part of being a successful investor. Because yes, there's a lot of science. There's no question about it. You need the rigor around the science, but because a lot of property is subjective to a certain degree, and that's what I love about it. We're not dealing with widgets here. They're all exactly the same. We're dealing every property in every street and every suburb is different from every other one. That's where the opportunity arises. And if you don't open yourself up to that creativity that goes with it, and allow that intuition to surface, because you know better than I do, we're absorbing millions of bits of information every second, but we're just not consciously aware of it. If we're able to honour that and get that balance between the two, then the results can be phenomenal. And just like yourself and your good wife, I've enjoyed similar as much because of the fact that my wife is a lot more relaxed and she'll get a feeling about something. Now, I asked her to try and explain it to me because my scientific rational head said, well, tell me why. She says, I don't know why, but I just know. And she proved to be right 99% of the time. So I love that. It's a really good balance to achieve in between. So I love you sharing that. Now, let's now sort of jump into your property journey if we can, because, a big part of what I'd love to share is the nitty-gritties of what you did, why you did it, what you've learned about it, what's worked, what hasn't. And as importantly, as you thread the needle on that, share how you were feeling at the time. Because, again, a lot of the things I think stop investors is this sense of stress and pressure because they're making a big decision. That can get in the road of actually taking that big decision. I'd love you to share, as we go through how you build your portfolio, how you overcome some of those inherent internal challenges that enable you to bite the bullet. So can you sort of take us on that? And just by way of explanation, I'm a big fan of PK Gupta, and I got an email from him yesterday that actually had your name on it, Azim, and talk with pride about what you achieved on one of your properties. And you've got a lot of respect for PK. So if you're one of his disciples, then that says a lot. But so take us on the journey ins and outs and the nitty gritties if you can.
Yeah, sure. So because as a young teenager, as I was sharing earlier, I was always keen to get into property and to invest my money and to have that asset base. When the time came for me to actually pull that trigger, I wasn't scared. I wasn't feeling overwhelmed. If anything, I was extremely ignorant, but also attached to that ignorance, I was very excited by what property can do for me, particularly at a young age when I was 24. So I was, over the years, was putting money aside. I knew what that money was for. So I was mentally prepared that, yes, whilst I'm saving this money towards a deposit, this money is not going to be sitting in my bank account for long. It is going to be dispersed out for the purchase of property. Now, I did what most investors do, buy something without actually doing the research, without a strategy, and bought it in my own backyard. So, all the red flags you could think of is exactly what I did. And obviously, as ignorance is bliss until that bliss is removed. So that was when I was age 24. And even then, Bushy, I have to say, in terms of the trajectory journey, I didn't realize, and the penny didn't drop for me at that point in time once I purchased it. It was actually a few years afterwards when the penny dropped, because amongst all of that, another mistake that I had made, which a lot of investors do, and I know we've spoken about in the past too, is they just take a very superficial view, which is what I did. And I looked at how much rent I was getting, how much the mortgage repayment was, and was I able to cover it? Yep, great, done, tick, move on. There was no thought process there about all of the other additional costs that do come. And those essential costs are like running a business. There are fixed costs and there are some variable costs. And that level of thinking wasn't there because I wasn't thinking like it was my business. Yeah. So a couple of years had passed by, and that's when I realized, like, wait a minute. When I actually started to realize there are more expenses involved in crunch the numbers, I realized that actually, okay, this is not the financial position that I want to be in, which is negative, which was in a negatively geared position.
Yeah.
I have learned from that along the way. So I started to then actually, I was like, okay, great. I still believe in the power of real estate because I have hearing enough stories out there. So if they can do it, I can do it. Yep. So what is it that I need to be doing? And so I just, through the virtue of reading books, online courses, speaking to people, what I would consume on social media, a wider range, I started to just, without any sort of structured thinking behind it, I just started to pick out what were the common things that were coming up again and again. So for instance, a common thing would come up, which is, that land appreciates and buildings appreciate. Great, cool. So that registered in my mind, and then moving forward as well to, the pros and cons of apartment versus the pros and cons of a single dwelling. Great. There's a lot of patterns I'm seeing there, so register that. So I started to pick those patterns up, and I kind of utilize that for the next couple of property purchases, which were then both freestanding properties, but they were also still within New South Wales.
Yeah. Just before you break into that, I'm assuming then, joining the dots here, that your first property was an apartment close to where you live. Is that okay? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. Okay.
So the first three then ended up being within New South Wales, but also at the same time, there was a lot of improvement in the selection process that had taken place as well too. And that was just because there was no formal education that I had done. It was just as you go along, pick up information, apply it, see if it works. If it does, great. If it doesn't, it doesn't. And so, yes, I wasn't repeating my mistake with the second purchase and the third purchase, but I was then making new mistakes as well along the way. Because you're purchasing in a different region altogether, you're purchasing a different property type, which is a dwelling on its own, with a different location and different demographics. And so I started to then pick up things along the way that were important. So for instance, I realized the importance of transportation, employment industries, diversification, the importance to avoid flood zones and bushfire zones. But these were things that wasn't through formal education. It was just by virtue of getting my hands dirty. And like you said in your intro, doing investing and not just thinking. And so as time went by, I was at that third investment property where I said, okay, I've got enough experience here now of what works, what doesn't work, and what not to do again. But I realized if I continue to do this, yes, I won't repeat the same mistake again for the next purchase, but I had no doubt in my mind, I'm actually going to make new mistakes. So how do I, in my mind, ask myself, how do I minimize the new mistakes from happening? And that's when the penny dropped for me, was that I actually didn't have a strategy to begin with. Otherwise, this wouldn't have happened to begin with. So the strategy was the biggest point for me that I was missing. So before we went any further, I needed to invest time to put together a strategy. And where that started from, Bushy, was just to be clear on what does our ideal lifestyle look like, which I know is something you ask. So
yeah,
I need to spend time to really get clear on what does that actually look like. And to be very, very frank with you, we didn't see eye to eye to begin with. We had different views. And naturally, that's just how it is. We're human beings. And particularly when you're in a marriage, it's quite natural for that to be the case. And so we both had to have a compromise where we both met each other halfway of what that ideal lifestyle looked like. My wife, initially, she was very clear that she wanted to go straight away and purchase her own property, our principal place of residence. Yeah. Whereas I knew that, yes, that is part of our future ideal lifestyle, but not immediately. It has to be down the track. So that was an example of one thing where we had to come to the middle. And mind you, there were certain things that I had to compromise on, but the power became when we took away that thinking and that discussion into a visual document. That was the turning point for us, is where I actually put it down on paper. And I said, great, I've got something. It's my anchor. I can look at it. I can touch it. I can feel it. I can reflect on it. I can see if we're on track and go forth. So that was the first point. And then the second biggest thing I did was I spent a number of hours and money investing into my education. So to date, I've spent more than close to probably about $20,000 in pure education through a wide range of sources. And I have to say, Bushy, you hear people say it often that, you got to invest in yourself before you invest your hard-earned money, but it cannot be any more truer than that. Particularly if you want to go up and be a do-it-yourself investor, then you have to be willing to spend that money and that time to really be able to do it as good as a buyer's agent, if not better. So that was the time where I kind of essentially sharpened the axe before we actually went and started to go chop the tree down. And so then when we did come back into the arena of property investing for actually, property number 4, that's when things completely changed for us, because we had spent the time on 3 key things that were different this time. There was a strategy in place this time. I had my wife on board. I had started to spend a lot of time assembling the right team around me. Yeah. And the education piece, the time and the money to educate myself through a wide variety of sources. And obviously within the team, within the education, and with the discussion of wife, there was a lot that was happening under all those. But just for our audience, if I was to really summarize it, those were the 3 key things that I did, so that when we went to execute, it was phenomenal. And in fact, what I was mentioning earlier, that property where I was over-analyzing whether we should put an offer or not, was the one that Sarah said, no, I think we need to, because there's no such thing as a perfect property. And to be honest, what I was, analyzing was literally, it wasn't a big deal. It was just me just trying to look for a perfect property because I knew what to look for. But again, as you know, every property is unique and everyone has ups and downs. There's no such thing as perfect property. And so that then really was the change in the tide for us with the subsequent properties that we purchased. So that turning point was, yes, I know not to make the previous mistakes from my hands-on experience, but how do I now minimize it? I minimize it by those 3 things: the strategy, the education, and starting to get a good team around me, which has made a difference. And mind you, along the way, things change. Team members change. You as an investor, and if you treat like your business, the more you try to expand your business, you might realize, wait a minute, the person who's managing the shop floor isn't the right person anymore because they can't manage it to the degree I need them to. So do I need to have a conversation with them, or do I need to get somebody else to replace them now? Or for instance, I'm noticing a change in someone's behavior, performance. What's going on? Do we need to have a conversation, or do I need to find someone else? So it's not a set and forget either as well too, which is another thing that I'm still learning, and I continuously review that as well, because a lot of things can change. But I think that middle point was where things really changed for us. And again, I would just emphasize, if anyone really is keen to do it yourself, you have to be willing to spend the time and the money to educate yourself. Otherwise, it is extremely risky. And take it for someone who started off without that education and strategy in the team. You can learn from those mistakes, but why would you want to make those mistakes that somebody else like myself has already made, and you can learn from those? That's what a wise person does, right? They learn from the mistakes that have already happened and avoids those, rather than saying, I need to have this as a badge of honor that I've made these mistakes as a stripe. No, I think that's a foolish way to think about it. Smaller, insignificant risks that along the way is fine. But I think, you want to avoid the major risks, and that's essentially which has helped us to be in the position that we are in. And even now, we spend more time. We're in a position where we can look to purchase again, but we've decided again, pull the handbrake, think about the strategy, think about the right structure. How do we want to be purchasing this? Speak to our independent team, get the pros and cons, think it through, and then come back ready to go. So I have a pure abundance mindset. And when you spend more time in industry, you realize, yes, you do get the bugbear and you do want to go and purchase property again. But when you have an abundance mindset, you realize, you know what? There will be another property out there for me. I'm going to take my time and get this right. Because if you get it wrong, then it's really hard to undo.
Well, I love that. There's so much to unpack with what you've just shared there. And, I'm sitting here nodding my head vigorously because I love the way you've integrated that all. You've sort of approached this from multiple fronts, but you've also been smart enough to recognise and have the self-awareness that as your knowledge improved and your awareness improved, you changed your approach. Because I see a lot of too much of the set and forget exercise, and almost a propensity for some investors to think, right, I've got the supermodel, that's it, I'll just rinse and repeat. As you and I know, we change and conditions change, so we need to be able to evolve with it. And as our comfort and our clarity increases, our ability to do different things also exponentially expands. But what I love as the cornerstone of what you shared is that vision piece, because again, I'm a stuck record on this, but there are so many people who really skip that important step. And what I love about what you shared then was the meeting of the minds between yourself and your good wife. But the really healthy thing about that is that it actually draws you closer together, because you're actually having the conversation to understand what each other is looking for in life. And until most people drift through life assuming, they don't never actually have that discussion. They never actually sit down and think about, well, what does our ideal lifestyle look like? And unless you have that discussion, and then you're able to appreciate what's important to your partner, and for them to appreciate you. Yes, it might be a compromise, but it's a positive compromise in the context of really fusing your joint objectives and goals towards making that happen. And it's such an important part of the process, I think. And as I say, 9 times out of 10, the people I talk to nod their head and go, yeah, great idea, don't do it.
Can I just share on that note, Bush, as well too? What was a really light bulb moment for Sarah and I was when we asked each other that question, what does our ideal lifestyle look like in your mind and in my mind? We painted a picture to each other. And what was interesting was when we painted the picture, out of all the things that I painted to her, one of them was the fact that I see ourselves being able to travel every single year, whether it's interstate or international, either way, whenever we want, however we want. And amongst other things, there was commonality in the other aspects. And when she painted her picture, she didn't mention travel, but she spoke more about kids and being able to have the time, not having to work, but being able to be there for our kids and help them in any capacity. And she brought it up to me and she said, did you notice that you, in your ideal lifestyle, you didn't talk about children? And I said to her, did you notice in your ideal lifestyle, you didn't talk about travel? And what was interesting was that it was still, it was very important for us, those two components. But what we realized was there were just some different rankings. That's where the difference was. But we would not have had that realization if we didn't have that conversation to begin with. So I absolutely agree with you. It sounds all like it's fuzzy and it's all just, buzzwords and just something that's nice to have. But it will be like that if you go with the wrong mindset. If you go with the right mindset, then you will actually be looking out for what are the patterns in our conversation, what is actually important to my wife or my husband, what are the values there, why didn't they mention certain things that I was expecting them to say, and let's unpack that as well too. Like that is deep, rich conversation, mind you, which takes multiple conversations to happen. It doesn't happen in one sitting. And
it doesn't stop either, by the way. Sonny and I revisit that vision every year. And it's a fun part of our annual getaway, actually, because we just throw it back on the table and say, what's changed, what's different, what do we want to do differently? And as I think it's the best bit of relationship counselling that Sonia and I do, because it forces us to actually get up front and dirty with exactly where we're at and where we're heading and what we want to be doing. So it's a great discipline, I think.
Absolutely.
Love that. You've covered a lot of ground there. So I guess just sort of putting a bow around this and reflecting now for a minute, what do you think's been your best and worst investment, and what have you learned from each of those?
I think the best investment was actually my health. And to this day, it 100% is. And why I say that is because for two reasons. One, what I learned from training was the ground principles that are needed to be successful in anything in life. The importance of a plan, the importance of execution, consistency, patience, sacrifice, the ability to come back and make a setback after failures and learn from those failures and injuries. So everything that I've learned from my health and training, I was able to then deploy in every other part. And to be quite frank, because I had put such a large emphasis and focus on my health from a young age, it naturally plays a role. It naturally plays a role in how you then perform at work. It naturally plays a role in how you show up for your family, for your relationships, for your people. And I say this to this day, even to Sarah, which is, I can't be there for you if I don't have myself in order. So I need to be myself in order. I need to be in check mentally, spiritually, emotionally, and physically. I need to be sound first before I can be there, even for you. As much as I love you to death, I can't be there for you in all aspects if I don't look after myself. So I think the investment in my health was definitely important for those couple of reasons.
Yep.
And the other part of the question was, what was the worst?
Yeah, what's the worst, and what have you learned from that?
Oh, the worst. There's too many. I would say, I think in my initial years, I was spending time getting advice from the wrong people, which is an investment of time. So that was time that I lost and I can't get back. So I think the simple way to combat that is to always ask yourself, is this person, has they already achieved what I'm wanting to achieve? And if the answer is yes, then continue to spend that time and invest that time to get the advice. If not, just respectfully and humbly walk away. And the other thing in more recent times where I made a bad investment was cryptocurrency. It is not something to be taken lightly. Mind you, I still believe deep down, Bushy, I don't know what your thoughts are, but I do believe that it does have some legs to stand on in the long term. Not all of the different tokens that are out there. Fortunately enough, the amount of money that we've invested is insignificant compared to our whole asset base and portfolio. So it hasn't had a financial impact on us. So definitely not investing any more money, but there's a small part of me that's just hoping one day it will just have there'll be a huge bull run. And when it does, we can, take a 12-month trip overseas.
That's the old speculator versus investor exercise, I think. And I agree with you. I think fundamentally the underpinning foundations for crypto and blockchain makes enormous sense. We just don't, there's not the critical mass there yet that support us as for me, as a sustainable investment vehicle. Yes, you can chuck some money at it and it's going to be a roller coaster ride. So if you're happy to lose the money, it doesn't matter. Have a go. No question. Over time, it will change. And we're now seeing, major investment funds start to embrace it. Once it gets to a level where there is the level of liquidity and associated reporting with it, then I think it has real potential, both as a functional exercise, but also as an investment asset. It's just a little bit early in this is the gold rush days for crypto. So I'm very hesitant about how much money I would toss into that can. I certainly wouldn't be putting the whole bucket into it. That's for sure. If we reflect back, if you're starting out again now, what, if anything, would you invest in differently, do you think?
I definitely would have invested probably a few things. The first one I would have invested in more time is surrounding myself with the right people. I eventually did do that, but I would have done that a little bit earlier in the piece. Yeah. And also with the education, I would have invested that time and money earlier into the education. But also coincidentally as well too, Bushy, the income that I was earning at that time, in reality, probably wouldn't have allowed me to actually spend that money to educate myself as well too. So I think there's something to be said about just fate and destiny and how things play out sometimes, because yes, I would have loved to, but I didn't have the disposable income at the time to spend thousands and thousands of dollars. But in the ideal world, I would have definitely loved to have done that as well to educate myself in that space. So they're the two that definitely come to mind, the who I surround myself with and the education base.
Well, now we've only just really scratched the surface, so we're definitely going to get you back to diving a bit deeper, even beyond next week's episode. But I want to jump now into what I affectionately refer to as the bushfire ambush round, where I give you the colloquial cigarette and blindfold and hit you with 4 quick questions. So the first of those is, if you could have a coffee with anyone, be they alive or a dead historical figure, who would you choose and why?
Oh, okay. So it's hard. I would say 2. I'm going to go with 2 if that's all right. So I would say I would have coffee with a gentleman named Gary Vaynerchuk, who's also known as Gary V.
Yep.
I follow a lot of his content, and for anyone who doesn't know who Gary Vee is, you can check him online. But he's just a phenomenal speaker on all things: life, career, brand, marketing, business, leadership, culture, just to name a few. And I get a sense he loves to talk. So I'd probably be the only one having the coffee, and I just let him talk, and I would just absorb as much as I possibly could from him.
Yeah.
The other person who I probably wouldn't have coffee with, I'd probably have a protein shake with, is Kai Green, who's a former professional bodybuilder, and just his approach and his mindset that he takes in life, his philosophy. I would just love to be able to tap into that and just apply even a little bit of that in my own life as well too. So it's incredible that if I could have a chance to do that.
Love it. Yeah, two really good examples there. Switching back into the investment arena for a minute, what's both the worst and the best piece of investment advice that you've ever received today?
The worst is buying off the plan apartment or a house and land package. And, look, whilst I'm saying that, with a bit of a chuckle, I don't want to say that it's a completely poor investment or a property to purchase. But I think by and large, I would say, it's in my professional and personal experience, it is the worst advice that I've ever received, and I to date still hear people give. And the best was not so much advice that I'd received. I just kind of picked it up from a lot of successful people, because success leaves clues. And it was essentially the fact that you need to invest time on yourself before you invest your hard-earned money. And I think that's something I have eventually done over time. I think you need to invest in yourself before you invest your hard-earned money. Otherwise, it just goes to waste.
100% agree. It's the old story of putting the oxygen mask on yourself before you then give it to friends sitting next door. Exactly the same thing. If you're not clear on what you're doing and why you're doing it and have the skills to do it, then you're likely to fall into some traps on the way. The other next question in the exercise: what superpower do you wish you had, and why?
So I am a strong believer that knowledge is power, but only if you execute it. So the superpower that I would love to have is to be able to absorb that knowledge instantly so that I can execute. So typically, as you know, for all of us, when we are absorbing knowledge, there's a gap between absorbing and understanding and then executing on that. I'd love the ability just to bridge that gap immediately and just be a robot to absorb the information and execute straight away. It probably helped me accelerate the portfolio even faster.
No, I love that. The psychologists always say you've got to hear something 7 times before it sinks in. I think it's more like 77. A lot of us, but I agree, you cut straight to the chase and it was deeply embedded in the conscious and the subconscious, then we'd have more confidence to make the call. The final one of these, and we've touched on this a bit throughout the chat and how important habits are. What's a personal happy habit, a rewarding ritual, or a daily discipline that you employ that's really contributed most to your success today, do you think?
I think it's two things: strategy and planning. They come natural to me in all parts of my life. And I think when I realized the importance of it a bit later in the investment journey for property, when I deployed it, it's been an absolute game changer, because the simple reality is, in simple terms, if you have a plan, you have something to work with, and you can shape it, you can mold it, you can tweak it, you can adjust it. But if you don't have anything, then you're setting yourself up absolute for failure. It is guaranteed there is failure. But even with a plan, even if it's not a perfect plan, you've got something to work with. So I think it's always best to have a plan, and in my case, over plan than to not plan or under plan. So that definitely has been a key ingredient in our success.
Yeah, I love it. Before we close then, what's the one question that you wish I'd asked you but I didn't, and if I did, how would you have answered?
Well, I wish you had asked me, Bushy, what are my top favorite exercises at the gym, because I know you love exercising, but it's a chore for you. But look, for me personally, I'm a little bit old school. I actually think you don't actually need the gym to really get a good workout in. All of your body weight exercises, I think, are the best. So all different variations of push-ups, all different variations of pull-ups, different variations of squats, dead hangs, and some cardio. I think that on itself, there's a lot your body itself can do and is capable of doing without actually having to be at a machine or with weights. So yeah, body weight is the way to go.
Love it. Absolutely love it. Look, mate, I really want to thank you for taking the time to share your very inspirational journey with us today, mate. And before we go, if anyone would like to ask myself or other property professionals any questions about Az's property approach, or you'd like to further discuss anything we chatted about with other like-minded investors in a very safe, relaxed and no-pressure environment, feel free to join us on the Property Hub Collective Facebook group by clicking the link in the show notes, and we look forward to connecting and continuing the chat there. In addition, if you'd like a confidential deep dive into your specific property needs or challenges, feel free to book in with me for a personal solution session by clicking the link in the show notes, where I'll give you my complete, dedicated and undivided attention for a full hour, along with my 40 years of life and property experience to help you solve your challenges and to move ahead. And we now look forward to continuing our great conversation with Az in next week's episode, where we're going to deep dive into the wealth of wisdom of property investment lessons, do's and don'ts that Azim is continuing to share in his Real Estate Muscle LinkedIn blogs. So remember to always get invested in your knowledge and your network, and we look forward to getting invested with you again then.
Great chatting. Thanks, Bushy.
Thanks for tuning in to Get Invested on the Property Hub podcast channel, your home for property investment insights and inspiration. Make sure you subscribe to Property Hub for free. Get your weekly dose of Get Invested inspiration along with every episode of Realty Talk, Australia's top online property show for red-hot property investing news and insights direct from industry leaders and influencers. And finally, I'll see you next time.